이제부터 본격적인 세션에 들어가겠습니다. 첫 번째 발표자는 함부르크경영대학원 오레스티스 시나스 교수입니다. 해양금융의 실무와 이론을 두루 갖춘 교수님의 강의는 많은 인사이트를 제공할 것으로 생각됩니다. 교수님께서는 동영상보다는 여러분들과 실시간으로 소통하길 원하셔서 독일 시간으로 이른 아침이지만 이렇게 줌으로 모시게 되었습니다. 큰 박수로 환영의 뜻을 표해 주시기 바랍니다. Kalimera Katikiti.
Kalimera σας.
Thank you for your early morning lecture. We are all ready. Now the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. A very warm good day from Europe, and I really wish I could attend this conference physically, but unfortunately due to COVID, traveling is really very difficult. Do you see my screen? Thank you. Thank you. I would like to draw your attention today on the status quo and of the current ship finance markets, and I would also I will attempt a forecasting of some global ship financing needs, and allow me also to focus on the greening requirements, because greening is right now in the top of the agenda in most European institutions. Furthermore, I would like to clarify one point, that of course I'm a professor of shipping and ship finance at the Hamburg School of Business Administration, but at the same time I am a partner of a ship financing vehicle in Europe, this HSBA Blue, and I will speak with both capacities, so I can provide also to our colleagues from the industry also our market feelings. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to clarify this point, because there are some data that are used that are purely commercial. Today I will provide you with an overview how we see the markets. I would like to focus a little bit on debt and to show you also some warning signals, especially from the European banks. Then based on a paper on research work that we have published, and it's available for academic and commercial use, I will provide you some forecasting of the global needs, and also I will focus on two markets that we consider in Europe at least as very important for, let's say, ship financing in the near future. The first one is the coastal shipping, the short shipping as we call it, that could also offer opportunities to Asian yards and financiers. I can also discuss let's say, the regions and let's say also what makes us believe that, and also the wind assist propulsion because of the need of decarbonization. Needless to say that I'm at your disposal for any further information or question that you might have, and the organizers are more than welcome to share my presentation and of course my contacts for any further discussion. Allow me to begin with a general overview of the shipping markets. I'm pretty sure that all of you know the big party that is currently going on, especially in the bulk markets. But I would like you to see the, let's say, almost the 20 years projection of the Clarksey index. Clarksey, as you can see, is this purple, and the Baltic Dry index, that is the green, vis-a-vis the price of fuel. I'm still using the 380 high sulfur, high fuel oil benchmark of Rotterdam. And as you can see, we are practically going also to the relatively high levels of the cycle. The market has been pretty depressed for more than 10, 11 years. But allow me to tell you that it is not depressed. This might be the normal expectation that you have in the freight market. On the other hand, what we can see is that continuously the fuel prices are climbing, and this is also our expectation that in the future we have to estimate our calculations with higher prices. As you can see, everything is indexed. But if we have a closer look at the developments of the last years, you can see that we are really going in a stage where the freight rates indexed are going to be stronger than the fuel prices, and that gives us the short-term belief of very strong markets, at least for the next 6 months or 1 year. This is also what we get. But this is, let's say, a very interesting development considering the, as you can see, the Clark's index. But, and I think that the Baltic indices for dry will also follow very, very dynamic. In terms of earning, you can see that since early 2000, we are practically at a higher level of the Clark's. The average, it's around 18.5 on average for all segments, vis-a-vis the 12 point, more or less 100 of the period 2010-2020. This is very, very encouraging considering the period of 2000-2010. You all recall the strong markets and, of course, the impact of the decision of China to join WTO. That is a very strong signal that in the near years we're gonna have also pretty strong markets. However, the history of statistics does not determine the future, and as you know, very high market prices will also be followed by very low ones. Why I'm saying that? Because these high prices in the freight market, these high freight levels, may give to the ship financiers two signals that, in my view, are more or less wrong. The first one is to expand portfolios, and the second one is to give more loans. As you know very well, to expand portfolios, from a bank perspective, you need at least 1 to 2 years of planning, and that means that by the moment the fresh capital will reach the market, then most probably the strong market will be gone. And the other point is that by aggressively financing ships with very high freight rates, then it might lead to false decisions when it comes to loan to value terms on a project basis. Nevertheless, I would like to highlight that as per the data of UNCTAD, the world seaborne trade will be strong. And if we follow the expected statistic growth, as you can see the trend, then we expect to have 32 billion tons in 2030. And we don't expect any real changes in the breakdown of the merchant fleet. Bulkers, tankers, and container ships will dominate the market as of today. Finally, I would like to highlight the value here of the fleet. As in many publications is pointed out, the total value of the fleet is around 1.2 trillions, 1,200 billions of US dollars. This is the amount of money that we have right now in the water. And of course, bulkers and container ships and tankers enjoy the highest percentage. I would like to focus a little bit on containers because containers are not some, let's say, in terms of numbers, fewer than bulkers and tankers. However, they have a value of asset value that is very, very close to the bulkers, and that is a sign of the quality of the asset or of the price of the asset for the moment. In this regard, not because originally I come from Greece, I would like to highlight the importance of the Greek fleet. That amounts around 12% of the total value. However, in other segments, as you can see in bulkers and in tankers, the fleet, the Greek fleet represents around the 20% of the total value, and in container ships around 10. Allow me to say that the appetite of the Greeks for, especially for container ships and feeders, is growing. So expect a higher percentage in the near future, because currently many Greek houses aggressively buy container ships. A big question mark is if these Greek operators will keep the containers for further operation, or they will just get into an asset play, a short-term asset play, for the period the container market remains strong. It is very interesting because we can see a reshuffling of the logistics chains globally as an impact also, or outcome of the COVID and the recent restrictions. So some very simple and first results. The number of the assets is growing steadily. The freight market levels are currently very promising and strong. The value of the asset is around 1.8 trillion. Bulkers, container ships, and tankers dominate the market. And in my view, bunker prices, the cost of fuel, will impact the future decision making because of the greening requirement and because of the ESG requirements at the corporate level. So very big companies in shipping, let's call them shipping corporations, will have to consider the ESG, the environmental and social governance principles in their management and policies and strategies. And that means that we might have decisions that are fundamentally impacted by greening, and smaller houses will go green because they have to reduce also their energy footprint and increase their competitiveness. So we think that greening is a catalyst of the next year's development. Going to the debt side, as you can see, the top 40 banks lending to shipping are continuously retreating. These are the latest data that we have for 2018. And you see that the portfolios of the top 40 banks for almost 500 billion. It was around 480 in 2007, has been reduced to less than 350. And I can also tell you that most of the European banks, what they have as capital declared for shipping is capital that should be wind down or reduced in the next years due to the capital adequacy requirements of the banks. Having said that, as you can see, with an index of 2008, considering, let's say, 2008 as a base year, the world fleet is steadily growing, while the available ship lending capacity from banks is continuously decreasing. And in terms of units, you can see that this spread is almost 62 units. This is a very big issue in the market, and that means that very few, very selected houses have access to ship financing. Having a closer look to the European portfolio, you can see that Germany, that originally had in 2010 around 150 billions, right now has less than 40 billions available for shipping. And I'm openly asking, this is not a rhetorical question, how many German banks are really available to finance projects? How many banks in Germany, and not only, but I consider Germany as the main source of ship financing, are really willing or able to support, let's say, a new building program in, I don't know, in Korea or in China or whatever, of container ships? this is really not a rhetorical question. The lenders are really leaving the market, and especially in Germany with an annual rate of retreat of around 13%. So you can see that the same trend applies in the UK. In France and Belgium, there is, let's say, more or less the same portfolio available, but as usually, this portfolio has been focused to very specific clients and very specific needs. The Dutch portfolio is not substantial, big or increasing, and always focused on local market or very large tickets of the very big banks like the ING or the ABM. These gentlemen, they usually have an appetite for very big and very solid projects. The Norwegian market is almost also retreating, as you can see, and other markets, including the Greek market, they remain especially weak. I mean, and this is not an issue of the shipping markets, but of the banking sector in these countries, because many of these banks, they have to get rid of NPLs and NPAs, non-performing assets and non-performing loans in their portfolio. So they are still under a sanitation procedure. The Asian banks, and allow me to focus only on debt and lenders, they try to cover, let's say, part of the gap that has been left by the retreat of the Europeans. So you can see that the Asian banks are covering part of it, but unfortunately, as you can see, this the increase of the market share of the Asian financial institutions is not as daring or let's say aggressive as we would like to, at least. And by considering Asian apologies, by considering Asian financial institutions, in most cases we discuss for houses that provide also schemes like Chinese leasing or relevant leasing schemes. So why I'm saying that? Because usually, unfortunately, for the average ship owner, for a small and medium enterprise in the shipping industry with 5, 10, 15 ships in the water with a pretty good balance sheet, it is quite difficult to find money for leveraging of further projects. And unfortunately, this is a case where we have very low LIBOR cost. The cost of lending, the interbank cost, is pretty low. And as you can see, it is practically at the lowest levels that we have in these years. And that is because of the availability of money in the interbank markets, especially in Europe and the US. There has been so much money printed or available from the central banks in the last years that the LIBOR remains at a very low level, and that makes ship financing very attractive. Have we seen any signals, or have we, let's say, any signals that that the LIBOR will pick up? Or I can't say anything like that. We don't have anything like that, but these are also geopolitical issues. To cut a very long story short, the risk-free rates are very low, and that makes financing also very attractive if available. I will also come to the debt. This is the last picture that it could that one can find in Clarkson's reports for the average margin and tenure. The reality is very simple. A big and solid company can find lending with LIBOR to 300, maximum 400, depending on the project and the employment, of course. But the reality is that smaller players in the market, they get LIBOR plus 600, even 850. And this financing comes, this cost comes as a mix of senior and junior that comes out of, let's say, syndication, if I may use the term, of senior debt of banks and alternative financial sources. The tenure of the loan, the average, remains relatively long, 5 to 7. Of course, there are some projects where you can hear for 3 or 4 or even 5 years, but usually the tenure of the loan remains 5 to 7. It is very important to consider the loan fees in all these calculations, because as you know, the loan fees may add a couple of hundreds base points. But in my view, what we can see is that given the retreat of the main houses, of the main shipping lending houses, the banks, then alternative financing houses or schemes will emerge in order to bridge the gap, however, at a higher price, even double digit in some cases. So this is, I think, the sum up of this part. I would like to say only that green regulation and fuel prices will impact the market, because the older tonnage has to leave the market as non-compliant. The existing ships need retrofit in order to comply, and new buildings, or let's say, or generally ships of higher technical sophistication, will be part of the solution. But we are talking about 3 different ship financing markets. So allow me to present some results from a paper that we have published recently that is available also freely as open access. Allow me not to focus so much on the figures. What we have done is that we have split the market in segments, the bulkers, the tankers, and the containers, and the rest of the ships into age groups. Let's say -3 to 2. This is, let's say, the order book and the young ships in the water, ships currently delivered. 2 to 7, because this is a completely different market for the ship financing. Usually these are brand new ships that comply, or they will tend to comply with environmental regulations. So given, let's say, an operating profile that we expect as reasonable, then these ships will be around B to C for the carbon intensity index. Then 7 to 12 is older tonnage that definitely need some retrofit, and these ships are too young to leave the market, but they might need some retrofit, and they might need also some special attention, for example, refinancing of the last balloons, etc., etc. While the 12 to 17 years are the ships after the second special and after the third special that are usually free of any mortgages, and they might seek for some liquidity financing, or even very good, let's say, they might serve deals as pledged assets. Ships that are over the age of 17, we consider that gradually will be scrapped, and this is the rationale. And I'm not going to stack with these figures, because I would like to show you here the aggregated results, where we consider that in total, the estimation of the fresh capital in terms of debt that is required will be around 380 billions, that is around 400. That is very close to what we have. And you can see that most of this money, most of this capital should or is expected to focus on new buildings. That is good news for the shipbuilding nations. And unless we have, let's say, this money poured to the new buildings, then I don't believe that it's very easy to change the age fleet and to change, let's say, the structure of the market to a more green and more compliant sum. This is also very good news for the retrofitting market, that we have estimated around 90 billions, 115 to 130. This is very important because, as you know, many European agencies and export credit facilities, they go for the retrofit. They have a very keen interest to support European technology also in third country yards. And of course, we believe that it will be I mean, the scrapping, the demolition, recycling activity will also pick up. So in you can see a little bit better these results in this graph. I think that fresh capital, almost equal to the current global debt portfolio of the top 40 banks, is required for greening. So the big question is, where can we find this fresh capital for lending? As I said, new buildings will attract most lending capacity, and retrofit will also attract the interest. And in my view, once again, the big issue is that we expect alternative financing sources to enter the market. So about the retrofit data, allow me to provide here only the data that have been published and announced in various technical bulletins. And as you can see, it is very difficult to support decisions. These are from ships that have reported recently greening projects and retrofit projects. You can see projects like dual fuel engine suites that costed 15 million, and the reduction potential in terms of CO2 emissions is 2 to 4%. You can see wind assist technologies like Flettner rotors, kites, wing sails, and all of these technologies gaining the attention and the momentum in the market. And you can, of course, see very conventional or expected means and technologies that can assist in decreasing the energy footprint, like bulbous flow optimization, pure hydrodynamics, or waste heat recovery. That is an optimization of the propulsion plant and of the energy management of the ship. So these are some of the retrofit reported data. However, I would like you to see them because it is in the submissions of the IMO. This is, let's say, the best quality data that we have, and we can work reasonably objectively. But as I said, this is a point that I will get back because it is very important to have the greening aspect in mind right now. I also said about short-sea shipping. Short-sea shipping is very important in the European trades. Why do I, let's say, focus on that in a Korean conference? I think because it is a very interesting market that could also interest not only research, but it could also interest commercial players. As you can see, the short-sea shipping of the freight in total sea transport in 2018, this is the last data available. They are very important. So you can see these yellow-green columns that show the importance in terms of, let's say, 0 to 100%. So on average in Europe is around 60, but there are countries, and not only islands like Malta and Cyprus, but countries like Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Bulgaria, that depend practically on coastal shipping. And you can also see that at the vicinity of Europe, geographically, countries like that, the United Kingdom, Norway, Turkey, they also enjoy a very high percentage of market shares in short-sea shipping. And as you can see, the short-sea shipping breakdown per market, like the Atlantic Ocean, Baltic, Black Sea, Mediterranean, Northern Sea, etc. In most cases, we are talking about liquid bulk. We are talking about small tankers. We have some bulkers that are usually specialized bulkers, like 1 or 2 holds bulkers for special cargoes like pulp or even cement or even, you know, very old twin deckers in terms of concept. And we have some container ships, many ro-ro ships, and some other cargo ships. But as you can see, mainly we're talking about liquid bulk and dry bulk. So if you see this breakdown per country, you will also see what is the dependency of all these countries per market, and that could also reflect the dependency of specific ship types. And in my view, what is very interesting to see is that despite all this effort in Europe from '92, the common transport policy in Europe was commenced in '92. So from in all these years, as you can see, Europe is still battling, is still trying to get cargoes shifted from road to the sea. The percentage of short-sea shipping is practically stuck because, as you can see, the average growth of the short-sea shipping market is almost similar to the average growth of the total market, while the growth of the road, and especially of the road, is higher than the growth of the total market. Why I'm saying that? Because once again, as you can see, we have a stagnant market shares, we have a growing market, but we have a very old fleet. So see here, for example, the big category of tankers. Most tankers are, as you can see, over 27 years old. They might serve also coastal and port trades. They might serve OPL, but as you can see, the average fleet is extremely old. The fleet of the dry bulkers is also very old. Containers is also very old. So this is a unique opportunity, especially for shipbuilding nations and ship financing houses, to work together and attack this market where you can see that the tonnage is old, needs definitely renewal, and at the same time needs greening. So that is very important in my view as, let's say, business case. And if you see, let's say, in terms of financial significance, it is not, let's say, the bulkers and the tankers that might interest you, but the high price units of ro-ro and passenger ships. Why? Because these ships here, as you can see, these ships here, the roll-on, roll-off units, these are very old. And we have markets like the Aegean, that is the East Mediterranean market, where we have 135 ships, ro-ro passenger ships with an age of more than 30. We have the Baltic market, where the ships are also old, with an average age of around 17 to 22. The same applies for the Northern Sea, and the same applies for the Western Mediterranean. So having said that, and once again, please do not focus so much on the data that you can analyze in the paper. What I would like to show you is that on average, we have a very, very good figure, or let's say we have a market that can support decisions in expanding in ship financing, also per category and segment. And we have also a very good estimated, please do not focus on this average, think that as, let's say, a general idea, there is let's say projects, there are projects available that can attract the interest of some financial institutions. So for example, a retrofit project for a bulker that is around 5 million is, let's say, a very small ticket for a bank. But however, if these tickets, if this project is combined, let's say, with a small fleet, let's say of 4 or 5 ships, then we have a ticket of around 20 and that could be a very interesting project for a bank, given that the ships can be pledged. So one last point, as I said, is the wind assist technologies. The wind assist technologies are getting momentum in Europe. As you can see, it started back in 2009 with the e-ships, and we have the Norse Power in operation ships, the Roro ships. We have a Mars Aframax. We have the Fen Pollux. We have the Viking lines. We have also installation from Anemi. Not all of them with Flettner rotors. There are also many technologies like EconoWind, NIAM, etc., that gain momentum. And that is one way to revive your ship and to keep the ship compliant with the new regulations. And for this, you need also some money. And in terms of projects, it might be around 1.5 minimum to 5 millions maximum. So once again, you can see the retrofit, let's say, market share here, what we expected as a market. And you can see that if the wind assist technologies get 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the market, you can see the expected market potential of the wind assist technologies. So this is great news, because definitely wind assist technologies will not dominate the market. And nobody expects the wind assist technologies to get a market share that is, let's say, more than 20, 30%, because it's very easy to retrofit the ships. It's very easy to install them. It is not, let's say, complicated. It's not, let's say, a difficult retrofit, but it gives also let's say, it gives let's say, a substantial market, a market of around 2, 3, 4 billions of US dollars, excuse me. And that means that industrial and technology financing can support further this segment. This is very important, at least in Europe, where, as I said, export financing facilities and technology financing facilities, national ones, are really supporting the decarbonization, and they really try to put money on retrofits. And in terms of number of ships, you can see that it is a very high number. Of course, not all the tankers should be considered. I'm also writing in the last slide that there are many limitations in this analysis because of the statistics. However, in terms of number of ships, you can see that there are many retrofit projects that can fit and support shipbuilding and retrofit activity. And last but not least, allow me to conclude on time so we can also have time for questions. As I said at the very beginning, the total value of the asset is around 1.2. The total exposure of the top 40 lenders is around 300 billions. That means that we have an industry of gearing with 25% only from banks. I'm not calculating alternative financing in this approach. The conditions for ship finance are good: strong freight market, stable interbank rates, and generally good macro conditions and expectations. Of course, I'm not in the mind of the President of the United States, or of the President of Russia, or of any other, let's say, big power that, whether we like it or not, they can decide upon our future. Greening, I think, is the name of the game. It is alternative fuels and alternative technologies. They will be deployed. However, they will come with a cost. That is a cost that will deteriorate profit margins. And definitely one more point that I would look upon is the carbon taxed operations in the near future. Finally, I would like to point out that the total market for specific segments like short-term shipping is growing. It is a market that can support decisions, and very few banks are supporting these markets. I also expect I also expect 70% of the sum to be directed to new buildings, and only, let's say, the rest to retrofits. I think that I'm repeating myself for the moment. Allow me only to point out that, as I said, in our calculations, there are many limitations. I'm very careful with my figures. I have used the cutoff of threshold of 30,000 deadweight tons for the short shipping, but one should be very careful and revisit the segment. And definitely one last point that we could consider is, let's say, calibration of the results with the unit cost of retrofits and new builds in terms of dollars per deadweight. That is something that we have not done yet, but it would be very interesting as an exercise. So I'm available for your comments and for your questions. Thank you very much.
박수 부탁드립니다. Thank you for your excellent presentation. If I may, I would like to deliver just one question from the floor. The question is, the role of commercial banks in Europe, especially those of Germany, UK, and Nordic countries, has been contracted dramatically since 2008 financial crisis. Do you think the commercial banks that exited from the market will return to the ship finance market in the near future with the recovery of the freight market? Do you?
May I?
Yeah.
I think that I've answered this question before. I think it's very difficult for commercial banks that were burned in early 2010, and they have lost billions, and they're still writing off assets of their books to retreat in the market soon. Especially the German banks, I think that it is very difficult for them because of the sentiment of the management of the banks against shipping. So I don't think that you can see the big names of the past again. What I expect is new banks, like the marine merchant banks in Norway, that is, let's say, practically financed by Germany, but in Norway. I expect, let's say, new financial institutions, very, very focused on shipping. And I think that this will be a new wave, a new generation of banks in Europe. But it's very difficult for a bank to come back. And one last point, given the Basel III, Basel IV regulations, it is very difficult for a rather generic bank, let's say a universal bank, to allocate money to shipping, to this class of assets. If they do that, they will do that through financial vehicles like funds or other vehicles where they keep the assets off their books.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. We have the discussion session at the end of the seminar, but since you are connected from abroad, and the discussion session is mainly in Korean, the discussion on your presentation has been brought forward.
Thank you.
So we have two discussants, Dr. Jae-min Lee and Mr. Byung-chul An. I would like Mr. Jae-min Lee to give some comments on your presentation. 이재명 교수님. 네.
Hello, nice to meet you. Professor Schinas, thank you for your great presentation. My name is Jae-min Lee. I was a professor of Korea Maritime and Ocean University, and I'm working at Maritime Finance Research Institute. Okay, I'm happy to listen to your excellent presentation about ship finance market trend. So I'd like to ask questions about ship finance market. in your presentation, we find that the volume of European banks loan in ship finance has been declining. The financing gap between top 40 lending and world freight has been widening. I understand the financing gap has been replaced by alternative finance, such as Chinese lease or private credit. You also mentioned greening. In the future, we can expect shipping companies need a lot of green finance for their decarbonization. So in this regard, my question is, the alternative financial resource can meet the growth of green finance in the future? Or is there a possibility that European banks might regain their portion to meet demand of green finance? I'd like to have your opinion about that.
Yeah, thank you very much. When it comes to very large projects, for example, the construction of cruise ships, or let's say of projects where the asset value is very high, then export credit facilities, or let's say banks like KfW, the German KfW, as you say, they might be a very good source of finance, but they have an interest for very large projects and very large tickets. So greening for them will be very high in the agenda. Also in Europe, there is availability of finance from European funds like the European Investment Bank, when there is the so-called European link. That means when the ship will trade in Europe. So, but I don't believe that the commercial banks will get back so easily. What I believe is that alternative financing vehicles like funds, debt funds, equity funds, you name them, they will join the market and they will offer capital at a cost that is close to double digit. This is my impression, and this is also reasonable, because as in terms of risk and yield, we are talking about higher risk and higher yield. Therefore, I think that alternative financing vehicles will dominate the market. What also I believe is that the European economy might generate liquidity. As I said before, European banks might have an appetite for ships, but they will do this off their books. For example, they will finance other funds, or they could be the senior or the junior players in syndicated projects. But directly, the bank to take the risk in their book, or the value of the asset, I find it very difficult.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Let's move to the next discussion. Mr. Han, please come here.
I can take over my device in order for you to hear my voice clearly. I'm working for the Busan Bank. I'm head of the ship finance department at the Busan Bank. So I'm very interested in the shipping industries and green ship industries. So my question is, I have some wondering about the green ship industries can change the ship owning the landscape completely changed. What I mean is that carbon neutrality is one of the most important issues about today all over the world, not for the shipping and all over the industries. So, and nowadays the carbon net zero, the goal is come through the fuels. Nowadays, a lot of options of the fuels. For example, the hydrogen or ammonia or methane, that kind of things. Lots of discussions on the discussions, and the very big technologies are being developed. But nowadays, there is no sure. So which fuels is a final goal to achieve the carbon net zero goals. So I just want to know your opinion about the fuel futures. And then my second question is the retrofit. Retrofit is not just a final step. It's just that in the middle of the step to get the final goal to the carbon neutral situation. Then, so you say that there are lots of chances for the finance for the retrofit. So I think it is sustainable or just kind of a transit, a temporary business chance. Please, I want to hear your opinion.
Yeah, thank you very much for your questions. First of all, I do agree with you that retrofitting is an interim solution. It's a transition solution for existing ships, because the industry and the market cannot afford to scrap all the ships in the water, because currently they do not achieve the net zero. So I think that for the next years, we're going to have ships that will install technologies that will reduce the carbon footprint, and they will continue trading. And one of the reasons why retrofitting is very important is because it is a business where the European yards and other yards can compete your shipbuilding capacity and technology. So I don't want to flatter your country, or I don't want to flatter, let's say, your competitors, China and Japan. But these three nations, Korea, China, and Japan, they dominate the shipbuilding market, and it is very difficult for other countries to find a way to compete. So the retrofitting and the greening technology might be a very good option from a policy perspective. So I agree with you that the future will be determined by the alternative fuels, currently alternative. But I have a very strong reservation on something, and this is the price. Just have a look at the price of the LNG. 2 weeks ago, it was something like $72 on $70 ton of oil equivalent, and right now it's 170. So the price, let's say, of alternative fuels, regardless if it is LNG, hydrogen, or ammonia, or methanol, or whatever, the price will determine the market attractiveness. Is it impossible to convince a ship owner for the moment to start building a ship when the infrastructure is not available for the alternative fuel, and the price of the alternative fuel is not currently known? It is not so simple just to pass the cost to the user, whoever the user might be, the charterer or the final consumer of goods in the containers. It's not so simple. And also, what I think is that we will never achieve the net zero technically. We will do that through market-based measures. So we might achieve a -30, -40% in terms of footprint, and the rest will be achieved through market-based, let's say, approaches. It could be cargo trade, it could be carbon allowances trading on all of this. So in few words, yes, greening is a catalyst for ship finance. yes, greening goes through the alternative fuels, but there is a risk, and the risk is the fuel per se. I would never advise a ship owner to buy a ship of modern technology unless there is an aftermarket. I mean, for you as a ship financier, is it so, I mean, would you, let's say, support a project where you cannot find a market for the ship in case of something happens? I don't know, default of the owners, default of whatever, wrong market. But we need always an exit plan. So how can you find a ship owner, or let's say a liquid market for your ship, if your ship is burning a fuel that is not traded or is not available in all regions or globally? So I'm very concerned, and that's why I think that we're going to have alternative financing in the next years, because the risk is higher, and therefore the yield that will be asked will be high.
And another question is the ship industry landscape will be changed completely. It is, I think there are some polarized of the ship owning industries. I mean, the big shipping companies can affordable to get the green ship. Green ship will be very expensive. So for SME shipping companies, they do not have any money or any funding source to get the finance for the green ship, very expensive ships. So that means the shipping industry is polarized. One is a big companies, small number of big companies can control the whole shipping companies. That means for example, Maersk, that kind of big companies, they are squeeze the lending margin. So we, as a commercial bank's perspective, it is very difficult to provide the finance for the big shipping companies because the margin is very small. So there is a good the chance of opportunities for the shipping industry is increase the shipping industry, so the getting smaller than shipping industry. So I don't know. So this is a good or bad for the commercial banks. So I just want to hear opinion.
Look, I think that there are, I mean, as you know very well, there are different segments in the market. So bulkers and tankers are fundamentally based on independent owners. And I cannot see any concentration in this market because charterers, let's say the users of this industry, are very happy with the extreme fragmentation. So, and this is, let's say, good news for the banks because many customers, many clients will be available for bulkers and tankers. And many different owners with different appetite and risk perspective will knock the door of the bank for business. In this case, for bulkers and tankers, what I think is very important is to consider future-proof technologies on board. So just having an engine and a shaft and a propeller is not enough. Maybe we have to consider diesel electric or other hybrid technologies as, let's say, transition technology to 2050. But for container ships, I agree with you that the big players will dominate the market. The big players already dominate the market, where 85% more or less of the trade is conducted through the 3-4 major players. And what I can see is that we have a new market of independent owners in the feeders who provide their services in the container business as asset operators to these big players or to the schedules. So I think for ship financing there is a market, but it's not a traditional market of the extreme security. So we have to become a little bit more bankers as in the past, and we have to forget the securities that we have enjoyed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where a good employment of 5 years was, let's say, the key to enter the bank. And allow me to say something. If the market is so strong, then how can you take an employment of today as granted for tomorrow? So I would be very careful with that personally, because at least in Germany, I've seen many projects collapsing because of the very long-term relationship of the charterer with the owner. And yeah, I think that it is challenging times, but greening is going to be the catalyst.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, Professor Schinas, thank you very much for your time and effort to make this seminar more valuable.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Now I will let you go to have a good cup of coffee and start your day.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Warm greetings to all the colleagues in Korea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.